Have you ever just stood there staring at a dying houseplant
Uh,
and felt completely mystified?
oh, absolutely. I think we all have.
Right. I mean, just you throw water at it, you add fertilizer, maybe move it to a different window, and you just watch it get worse.
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a really fascinating piece of source material today that actually addresses this, but from a pretty wild perspective.
Really wild. It's not your standard gardening advice.
Not at all. It's an obscure but honestly incredibly dense archive from a site called qianmeng.org,
Yeah?
and we're zeroing in on a specific post titled Notes on Gardening, Part 819, on phosphorus deficiency. The author goes by Ang, and he describes himself as an old software plumber.
Which is such a great title.
It really is. So our mission for you on this deep dive is to see what happens when someone takes the rigorous, highly analytical mindset of open source software development and applies it to the wild, chaotic reality of a living ecosystem.
Which turns out to be an incredibly productive lens for analyzing any physical system.
Right.
Because if you spend time looking through the archives on his site, you immediately realize this is not someone who casually planted a basil seed and decided to write a quick blog post.
No, definitely not.
When you mention the title is Part 819, that number is entirely literal.
Wow.
Yeah, he has been logging his daily observations since July of 2011. The sheer volume of data he tracks is just staggering, and it spans multiple disciplines.
I was looking at the sidebar of his site, and it completely reframes how you read his gardening advice. He logs absolutely everything in his life with that same meticulous attention.
Everything.
You see project tags for notes on Haskell programming, which is up to part 70.
Yeah.
He has notes on fish keeping, where he's tracking the granular details of beta spawning logs over 200 posts.
It's amazing.
There are extensive logs on AI, typesetting, networking, Python, Erlang, Elixir. I mean, in just the first 2 months of 2026 alone, he published nearly 200 updates.
And the mention of languages like Erlang and Haskell is particularly telling here. Oh. Well, those are programming languages, famous for building highly robust, fault-tolerant systems. Developers who work in those environments are trained to anticipate failure.
Right.
They map out complex state machines, they track the inputs, monitor the outputs, and they hunt for hidden bugs in the logic.
Ah, I see.
So when an engineer with that specific kind of systemic thinking turns their attention to a potted plant, they strip away all the usual folk wisdom and guesswork.
We treat it like hardware.
Exactly. A potted plant is essentially a closed-loop system, and Ang treats it like an operating system that needs to be tracked, understood, and occasionally patched.
And that systematic approach leads us to the first major aha moment in his notes, which completely flips a common gardening assumption on its head.
Yeah, this part is brilliant.
Right. Ang notes right at the beginning of the post that he hadn't had to deal with plant pests or diseases in quite a while. And the reason he gives is that he seldom fertilizes his plants anymore.
Which is so counterintuitive.
Right. Most people operate under the assumption that fertilizer is universally good.
We tend to view it like a vitamin supplement, like the more you give a plant, the stronger and healthier it will be.
Exactly.
And logically, you'd think a stronger plant should be better equipped to fight off an infestation. But biologically speaking, pumping a plant full of heavy synthetic nutrients often triggers a rapid, unnatural surge in new growth.
And to a pest, that fresh, tender, nutrient-dense tissue is basically an all-you-can-eat buffet.
100%.
It's incredibly soft, making it easy for things like aphids or spider mites to pierce the surface and drain the sap.
Yeah, they just flock to it.
So by turning off the tap on the fertilizer, Ang is deliberately restricting that explosive growth. He's enforcing a slower, steadier development cycle where the plant tissue has time to harden and become resilient.
It's a calculated defensive posture. He mitigated a severe bug problem, literally and figuratively, not by introducing a new chemical pesticide to the environment, but by removing an input.
Taking something away to fix the problem.
Right. He stopped artificially pumping up the system, which stopped painting a target on his garden for every hungry insect in the neighborhood.
Nature, however, rarely lets a system coast in a state of perfect equilibrium.
No, never.
You solve one vulnerability, and the environment inevitably finds a new way to test the infrastructure. And this is where the physical environment of Ang's garden becomes a primary antagonist.
Because he's dealing with a tropical climate.
Right. He is managing these plants outdoors in extreme tropical weather.
And tropical environments are notorious for exposing the hidden flaws in any system. He describes the weather as swinging violently from a scorching sunny day one moment to a heavy downpour the next.
This massive extremes.
Yeah. Whether you're pouring concrete for a bridge, testing a piece of hardware, or trying to keep a root system alive in a plastic pot, extreme oscillation is the ultimate stress test.
The temperature and moisture swings accelerate the breakdown of materials. Like, in a perfectly controlled, mild climate, a plant might be perfectly fine sitting in subpar soil for years. But baking in the tropical sun turns certain types of soil into a literal brick.
And then a torrential downpour hits that brick.
Exactly. The water just channels down the inside edges of the pot and drains out without ever penetrating the root ball. The extreme weather just strips away any margin for error.
Which inevitably leads to a failure cascade. Because of that environmental stress test, a flaw in Eng's system is brought to the surface, and he files what amounts to a bug report.
Right, he observes a new visual symptom on the leaves of this particular plant.
And what did he see?
He notes seeing dark, purple, or reddish-brown blotches, and these blotches are surrounded by yellowing tissue. He actually uses the technical term for this yellowing in his notes, referring to it as chlorosis.
Chlorosis is the physical manifestation of a failing energy cycle.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. When a plant exhibits a chlorosis, it means it's struggling to produce enough chlorophyll to maintain photosynthesis. It's the biological equivalent of a server's check engine light flashing red.
I love that analogy.
The core engine is failing to convert solar input into usable energy, and those dark purple and reddish-brown blotches provide the specific error code.
So Eng runs these visual clues through his mental database, cross-referencing the purple blotches and the chlorosis, and he arrives at an initial diagnosis.
Which is?
Phosphorus deficiency.
Okay.
Now, if I'm looking at a plant that is clearly deficient in phosphorus, my immediate reaction is to go to the hardware store, buy a bottle of liquid phosphorus, and just pour it into the dirt.
And that is the standard consumer response.
Right.
We observe a symptom, a lack of a specific mineral, and we attempt to overwrite the symptom by flooding the system with that missing variable.
Fix the output.
Exactly. But an engineer trained in root cause analysis knows that treating the symptom rarely fixes the underlying architecture. Eng doesn't just accept that the phosphorus is gone. He investigates the mechanism of why the plant can no longer access it.
And his notes outline two distinct potential causes for this specific deficiency in a potted environment. The text states that a plant usually gets locked out of phosphorus when either the soil has become too acidic or the roots are struggling to survive in heavily compacted earth.
It presents a really clear either-or scenario for his debugging process. Acidic soil requires one type of intervention, while compacted soil requires a completely different approach.
Right.
Through his daily observations and his historical knowledge of the pot, Eng deduces that soil compaction is the actual culprit here.
The way he arrives at that conclusion requires digging into the historical logs of this specific pot of dirt.
Yes.
Which is arguably the most fascinating part of his entire analysis. He traces the timeline back to when he first acquired the plant, and he points out a crucial detail. He never changed the original soil when he brought it home from the nursery.
And the composition of nursery soil is a critical variable here.
Tell us why.
Nurseries are optimizing for rapid growth and easy transport, right?
Good.
They often use organic additives like chicken manure in their potting mixes.
Ah, chicken manure.
Yeah. The manure serves a dual purpose. It provides a massive hit of nitrogen for quick growth, but more importantly, it fuels the microscopic ecosystem in the dirt.
So the manure feeds the bacteria and fungi.
Exactly.
As those microbes consume the organic matter, they break it down, move around, and naturally aerate the soil. Their biological activity creates microscopic tunnels that keep the earth loose, allowing oxygen and water to reach the roots.
The soil is essentially a living, breathing engine.
Wow.
And this is where systems thinking provides such a massive advantage because we can now trace the domino effect that caused the system to crash.
Right, let's trace it.
The nursery relied on a constant input of chicken manure to maintain that biological aeration engine. Eng brought the plant home, and in a calculated move to prevent pest explosions...
He stopped applying any new fertilizer.
Exactly.
He literally starved the microbial engine to protect the leaves from bugs.
Yep.
So the unintended consequence of that defense mechanism is that the organic breakdown process in the soil eventually ground to a complete halt.
Without the microbes actively chewing through new organic matter and tunneling through the dirt, the physical structure of the soil just collapsed.
That's soil compacted.
The soil compacted. Add in the environmental stress test we discussed earlier, the scorching sun baking the dirt, followed by heavy rain compressing it further.
And that nursery soil essentially turned into concrete,
It really did.
which means the phosphorus might actually still be sitting right there in the pot.
Exactly.
The plant isn't starving because the chemical nutrients are gone. It's starving because its roots are physically locked in a vault.
They're suffocating.
They're suffocating in compacted earth and cannot physically reach the food that is millimeters away.
It perfectly illustrates the danger of treating the symptom. If you had followed your initial instinct and poured liquid phosphorus over that plant, it wouldn't have resolved the failure.
Because it wouldn't reach the roots.
Right. The liquid would have either pooled on the hardened surface and evaporated in the tropical sun, or it would have run down the extreme edges of the pot, bypassing the root system entirely. The plant still would have died.
I had a very similar experience trying to debug a sluggish laptop a few years ago.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. The machine kept freezing, so I assumed it was a software bloat issue. I spent days backing up files, wiping the hard drive, completely reinstalling the operating system.
Let me guess it didn't work.
It didn't fix a thing. Eventually, I opened up the actual casing of the laptop and found that the physical cooling fan was completely choked with dust.
Wow.
The software was fine. The processor was just physically overheating and throttling itself. I was trying to fix a hardware problem with a software patch.
That is a perfect parallel. You were addressing the output, the sluggish performance, rather than the physical environment generating that output.
Exactly.
Ang recognizes that his plant has a physical infrastructure problem, not a chemical supply problem.
And this realization dictates his action plan. To deploy the quench, Ang doesn't add chemical nutrients.
Yeah.
He decides to completely repot the plant using a new high-drainage potting mix.
The shift to a high drainage mix is a permanent structural fix.
Right.
When we talk about high drainage environments, we're talking about soil that is heavily amended with chunky inorganic materials.
Like what?
Things like perlite, pumice, or coarse orchid bark. These materials physically hold the soil apart. They create permanent macroscopic air pockets that cannot collapse, regardless of whether there's active microbial breakdown happening.
So he's replacing a system that relied on constant biological inputs, the chicken manure, with a system that relies on stable physical architecture.
Precisely. By moving the plant to this chunky mix, he restores the infrastructure. He gives the roots the physical space they need to breathe, expand, and efficiently process those heavy tropical downpours without drowning or suffocating.
And once that environment is corrected, the plant can go back to extracting the phosphorus it needs naturally.
His underlying philosophy is clear. Correct the environment first, and the organism will usually heal itself. It's an incredibly elegant, low-intervention approach to problem solving.
The tone he strikes at the very end of his notes really captures the essence of this mindset.
It really does.
After laying out this detailed, multi-layered diagnostic tree, tracing the root cause from purple blotches past the missing fertilizer all the way down to the compacted nursery soil, he signs off by simply writing, "Let's see how it goes. Till the next post."
It strips all the ego out of the process.
Yeah.
He isn't presenting himself as a master gardener who has miraculously cured the underlying ailment. He is an engineer submitting a patch to the code base.
The low-stakes nature of that iterative mindset is incredibly freeing. He observed the bug, he identified a highly probable root cause, and he implemented a structural change to the environment.
And now he'll just monitor the logs.
Right. If the new high drainage mix doesn't resolve the chlorosis, he hasn't failed. He's just eliminated one variable, and he'll write part 820 to try another.
When you adopt that perspective, failure ceases to be a catastrophe. It simply becomes valuable data that informs the next iteration.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, pulling insights from software development, soil microbiology, and tropical weather patterns.
A lot of ground.
So, to distill Ang's 819th gardening log into a few core takeaways for you. First, reconsider the instinct to constantly feed a system. Withholding fertilizer is a highly effective, counterintuitive defense against pest explosions.
Forcing steady, resilient growth is often better than artificially pumping up vulnerable tissue.
Exactly. Second, learn to read the specific error codes your environment is giving you.
Right. If you observe dark purple or reddish-brown blotches accompanied by chlorosis, your plant's energy production cycle is failing, and it's likely a severe phosphorus issue.
And third, always check the physical infrastructure before you start adding new inputs. The problem might not be a lack of nutrients or resources. The environment itself might be compacted, physically locking the system out of the materials it needs to thrive.
And, the broader applications of this debugging process extend far beyond tropical houseplants.
Absolutely.
Think about the workflows, the projects, or the teams you manage. When a complex system stalled out, when productivity drops or creative output slows, our immediate corporate instinct is usually to flood the system with new inputs.
More meetings?
Right. We throw more budget at the problem, we schedule more oversight meetings, or we introduce complex new management software.
We dump liquid phosphorus on concrete.
Precisely. Ang's methodology challenges us to pause and examine the underlying structure first. Is the workflow failing because it lacks resources, or has the environment itself become too rigid and compacted for growth to occur?
That is such a good point.
Sometimes you don't need to add anything, you just need to break up the hardened bureaucratic structures so that information and creativity can naturally flow again. Fix the environment, and the system often corrupts its own output.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The physical architecture dictates the chemical reality,
Yep.
which leaves a final, lingering thought to mull over. We spent this entire deep dive dissecting just one post out of a 15-year archive of daily logs.
Just one.
We saw how a software programmer uncovered profound, actionable truths about biology, simply by rigorously tracking his daily observations year after year.
It's incredible.
It forces you to wonder, what invisible patterns in your own life might reveal themselves if you just started writing them down?
Yeah.
If you treated your own habits, your own stress tests, and your own daily friction with that level of meticulous tracking, what hidden root causes would you finally uncover?
The data is always there. We just rarely take the time to log it.
Keep observing the systems around you, keep questioning the root causes, and above all, keep exploring. We will catch you on the next deep dive.